Have you ever found yourself questioning your worth in a relationship, wondering if time has slowly erased the person you once were? Imagine being with someone you love deeply, only to feel their admiration fade, replaced by subtle criticisms that chip away at your spirit. How would you respond? Could you stand firm, or would the weight of those words consume you? In today's video, we explore the emotional journey of a man who faced this very struggle, navigating the harsh realities of love, aging, and self-worth. This story will take you through heartbreak and resilience, rejection and rediscovery, and the ultimate triumph of choosing dignity over despair. By the end, you'll uncover profound lessons about self-respect, the courage to walk away, and the power of reclaiming your life. Stay with us, because this isn't just about one man's story, it's a reflection of the battles many of us face in relationships and life. If you've ever doubted your value or struggled to rise above someone else's judgment, this video is for you. Together, we'll uncover the wisdom that comes with embracing our true selves and living life on our terms. Don't miss a second. It could change the way you see yourself and your relationships forever. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I encourage you to click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on today's topic. If you enjoy the content, please comment 1 below. If it doesn't resonate with you, leave a 0. Your feedback is crucial as it helps me create better videos that align with your interests. Now, let's get started. At first, he tried to brush it off with an artificial chuckle, a forced laugh that felt foreign even to him. He told himself they were just harmless quips, playful banter, the kind of jokes everyone makes when age is part of the equation, especially in a relationship where years are more than a number. Who hadn't heard those remarks about older men with younger partners? He wanted to believe that by joining in on the laughter, by pretending it didn't hurt, he could strip the words of their sting. But deep down, each joke cut a little more than the last, carving invisible scars into his pride. He tried to rationalize it. She doesn't mean it, he thought. It's just her way of being playful. He would smile, even as a knot of unease tightened in his chest. He tried to convince himself that love, their love, was stronger than this. After all, they had shared so much. The laughs, the conversations that stretched into the early hours, the tender moments when the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. He clung to those memories, hoping they would drown out the growing sense of inadequacy that her words planted in him. But as the days turned into weeks, those cutting remarks became more frequent, more biting, and infinitely harder to ignore. What started as light-hearted teasing evolved into a relentless barrage of subtle but cutting criticisms, each one landing like a quiet accusation. His laughter, once an act of deflection, now felt like a hollow shield, incapable of absorbing the blows. Her words lingered long after the jokes ended, echoing in his mind during quiet moments. She began to comment on his slower steps, the stiffness in his joints, the tiredness in his eyes, each observation a glaring reminder of his age. Every remark was a mirror reflecting the passage of time, forcing him to confront the parts of himself he tried to ignore. At first, he'd counter her comments with self-deprecating humor, trying to lighten the mood and shift the dynamic. "I guess I should start practicing yoga," he'd joke when she teased him about his stiffness. "Maybe I'll join a marathon next year," he'd say when she pointed out his slower pace. But no matter what he said, her responses always felt heavier, sharper. The jokes no longer felt playful. They felt like a spotlight on his shortcomings, a magnifying glass over every line on his face, every ache in his back. Slowly, the man who once felt so secure in his own skin began to crumble under the weight of her disdain. It wasn't just about the age gap anymore. It was about the unspoken truth her humor seemed to reveal. He wasn't enough. The man who had once enchanted her with his confidence and charm was now overshadowed by the inevitability of his aging body. Her playful banter turned into a thinly veiled disdain, and no matter how hard he tried to laugh along, he couldn't deny the weight of her words. They clung to him like an unwelcome shadow, growing heavier with each passing day. The breaking point came one night in the darkness of their bedroom, a place that had once felt safe, intimate, and full of connection. The topic of their intimacy emerged unexpectedly, slipping into the conversation like a cold draft under a door. At first, it was a casual comment, offhand, almost innocent. But it quickly spiraled into something far more cutting, far more deliberate. Her words hit him like sharp, icy daggers, piercing through his defenses. She called him predictable, uninspiring, lacking the vitality she craved. With a voice laced with frustration, she suggested that a younger man, someone with boundless energy and physical vigor, could offer her what he could not. Her words didn't just wound his pride, they shattered his spirit. The humiliation was raw and suffocating, a visceral ache he couldn't escape. It wasn't just about their physical connection, it was about everything he believed himself to be. His identity, his masculinity, his worth as a partner and as a man were all under attack. He had built his sense of self around the belief that love transcended the superficiality of youth and beauty, that it thrived in the depths of emotional intimacy, shared experiences, and unyielding care. But to her, none of that mattered. She didn't see the years of wisdom, the tenderness, the love he offered so freely. She saw only what he lacked, what time had taken away. Desperate to bridge the growing chasm between them, he tried to argue, not angrily, but earnestly, with all the vulnerability he could muster. He spoke of love as something greater than physicality, as a bond strengthened by understanding, shared memories, and quiet moments of connection. He tried to explain that intimacy wasn't just about passion or performance. It was about trust, tenderness, and the kind of closeness that only grows with time. His words were heavy with emotion, his voice trembling with the desperation of a man who felt his world crumbling. But his words seemed to fall into an abyss, swallowed by her silence and the unspoken truth that hung between them. In that moment, he realized it wasn't just his body she was rejecting, it was him. The man who had once been her safe haven, her source of love and admiration, was now a relic of a past she no longer cherished. And as he lay there, staring at the ceiling in the suffocating quiet of their shared bed, he felt an ache far deeper than the one in his aging bones. It was the ache of loss, of love slipping away, of being seen but no longer truly known, of realizing that the person who once looked at you with admiration now only saw your flaws. For the first time in his life, he felt truly, utterly old. It wasn't the passing years or the creases on his skin that made him feel this way. It was the loneliness, the cold realization that he was no longer the man she wanted, no longer the man she believed could fulfill her needs. And as he lay there in the darkness, he couldn't help but wonder if he had been wrong all along. If love was truly meant to fade, like the strength in his hands, the color in his hair, and the fire that had once burned so brightly between them. Her harsh tone drowned out his words, silencing him as though he were speaking into a void. Each rejection reverberated through him, leaving cracks in the foundation of his spirit. The pain was raw, unrelenting, and more profound than anything he had experienced before. Her words were like shards of glass, slicing through his heart and leaving him exposed and vulnerable. He felt unmoored, adrift in a sea of humiliation, wondering how the person he loved could reduce him to this. Yet, even amidst his emotional turmoil, a small ember of defiance began to glow deep within him. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a reminder that he was more than her cruelty, more than her dismissive words. If you are still watching this video, and find these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. This ember carried the weight of his life's experiences, his hard-earned wisdom, and the resilience he had cultivated through decades of challenges. He wasn't just a slowing body or a fading shadow of his younger self. He was a man who had lived, who had loved, and who had learned what it meant to bring joy and understanding to another human being. He had insights and knowledge that transcended the superficial vitality of youth, an emotional depth that no younger man could hope to replicate. Straightening his posture, he drew on that inner strength and steadied his voice. "I can please you in ways younger men can't even imagine," he said, each word deliberate and measured. His tone was calm yet resolute, infused with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his worth, even if she did not. He spoke not of fleeting passion but of an enduring love that was rooted in tenderness, care, and the profound intimacy born of years of understanding the human heart. He painted a picture of love that went beyond the surface, a love that was not just about physical touch but about connection, trust, and shared vulnerability. But his words fell flat, meeting only mockery in return. She laughed, a cold and hollow sound that seemed to echo in the space between them. Her response was laced with derision, dismissing his attempts to preserve their bond as desperate and pitiful. She belittled him, her words reducing his heartfelt plea to nothing more than the ramblings of an aging man clinging to an illusion. Each cruel remark landed like a hammer blow, crushing the fragile hope he had held on to. The pain of her rejection was almost unbearable, but what hurt even more was the realization that she no longer saw him for who he was. To her, he was no longer a man of wisdom and strength. He was merely an old man, someone whose value had diminished with time. Her disdain stripped away the layers of his identity, leaving him feeling small and insignificant. The love they once shared, the connection he had cherished, now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the cold reality of her contempt. Still, a part of him clung to hope. He told himself that this was a test, a trial he had to endure to prove his worth, not just to her, but to himself. He believed that if he could withstand her cruelty, if he could show her the depth of his love and resilience, she might one day see him anew. He imagined her realizing, perhaps in a quiet moment of reflection, that he had given her something no one else could, unwavering devotion and a love that transcended time. But as the days turned into weeks and her comments grew more cutting, that hope began to wane. Each harsh word, each dismissive laugh, chipped away at his self-esteem. He became a shell of the man he once was, his confidence eroded by her relentless criticism. He began to doubt himself, questioning whether he truly had anything left to offer, whether his love was enough, or whether it had ever been enough. The illusion that he could somehow win her back, that he could prove his worth, began to crumble under the weight of her disdain. He started to see the truth he had been avoiding. This wasn't love. This was a slow, insidious erosion of his dignity. He was giving away pieces of himself, sacrificing his pride and self-worth for a relationship that no longer nurtured him but diminished him. The realization was painful, yet it brought with it a sense of clarity. He could no longer ignore the toll her words and actions were taking on him. He could no longer pretend that enduring her cruelty was an act of love. With quiet determination, he made the decision to let go. It wasn't easy. Ending something he had fought so hard to preserve felt like admitting defeat. But he knew it was not defeat, it was liberation. It was an act of self-respect, a reclaiming of his identity and his dignity. One evening, he looked her in the eyes and told her it was over. His voice was steady, his words firm but devoid of anger. He spoke with the calm resolve of a man who had finally chosen to honor himself. Her reaction was one of shock. She stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and confusion. For so long, she had seen him as someone she could belittle, someone who would endure her disdain without question. The idea that he could stand up for himself, that he could walk away, was something she had never considered. Her angry words followed, sharp and biting, but this time, they didn't affect him. They rolled off him like water on stone, powerless against the strength he had found within himself. For the first time in years, he felt free. It was as though a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders, allowing him to stand taller, breathe deeper, and see the world with renewed clarity. He had shed an old skin, leaving behind the pain and humiliation that had held him captive. The scars of her rejection would remain, but they were no longer a source of shame. Instead, they were a testament to his resilience, a reminder of the strength it took to choose himself. As he walked away from the life they had built together, he felt a profound sense of peace. He was no longer bound by her judgment or her cruelty. He was free to embrace the man he was, a man of wisdom, depth, and unyielding strength. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had reclaimed his dignity, and with it, his freedom. For the first time in a long time, he felt whole. Though the decision to walk away brought moments of doubt and deep loneliness, it also opened the door to rediscovery. In the quiet aftermath of the breakup, he was forced to sit with his thoughts, confronting the emptiness he had been running from. Yet, as painful as those early days were, they gradually became a blank canvas, a space where he could rebuild not just his life, but himself. He reached out to old friends, people he had unintentionally drifted away from during the relationship. Their warm responses surprised him. These were people who remembered his laugh, who knew the fire he carried within before it had been dimmed by years of compromise. They welcomed him back with open arms, reminding him of the person he had been before he started defining himself through someone else's eyes. With their encouragement, he started checking off the list of places he had always dreamed of visiting but had never made time for. He walked along the shores of quiet beaches at sunrise, feeling the sand between his toes and the ocean breeze on his face. He wandered through cobblestone streets of small towns, losing himself in their charm and history. Each journey was a step toward reclaiming a part of himself he thought he had lost forever. At home, he dusted off an old guitar that had sat untouched in a corner for decades. As he strummed the strings, the melody that emerged was shaky at first, but it carried the echoes of his younger self. Hours would pass as he lost himself in the music, pouring into it all the emotions he had bottled up for so long. The act of creating, whether through music, painting, or writing, was like finding pieces of himself scattered through the years and putting them back together. He also began to find joy in the smallest of things, the way the morning light streamed through his window, the feel of a book in his hands as he turned its pages, the simple pleasure of a steaming cup of coffee savored without rush. Life's beauty, he realized, wasn't in grand gestures or dramatic moments, but in the quiet, enduring pleasures that filled each day. Slowly but surely, his perspective on aging began to shift. Each wrinkle on his face became a badge of honor, a testament to lessons learned and battles fought. Every silver strand of hair told a story of resilience and survival. He began to see aging not as the loss of youth, but as the gaining of wisdom, a kind of wisdom that allowed him to finally grasp the truths he had missed before. Life wasn't about proving your worth to others. It was about honoring yourself, cherishing the experiences that shaped you, and embracing the person you had become. For the first time, he stopped sacrificing his happiness to meet others' expectations. He no longer sought approval from anyone who couldn't see the depth of his love or the richness of his experiences. His happiness, he discovered, was his to create, his to protect. Choosing peace and self-love over the weight of others' demands felt liberating in a way he had never known before. His newfound freedom brought clarity, peeling back layers of insecurity that had clouded his vision for years. Each decision he made now revolved around his well-being, his joy, and his purpose. The mornings felt brighter, the air fresher, and the weight of emotional baggage he had carried for so long was finally gone. He didn't just wake up each day, he greeted each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to live on his terms. He immersed himself in long walks through nature, where the rustling of leaves in the breeze and the calls of birds provided a kind of music no human could compose. The natural world reminded him of his place in the vast tapestry of life, grounding him while also giving him a sense of wonder. He would sit by rivers, watching the water flow endlessly, a metaphor for his own resilience and ability to move forward despite obstacles. His relationships, too, began to flourish in ways they hadn't before. Old friends became his pillars, people who truly saw him, valued him, and cherished the man he was. They shared laughter that came from a genuine place, untainted by judgment or ulterior motives. Over cups of coffee, long phone calls, and impromptu gatherings, they exchanged stories that warmed his heart and filled his soul. These connections reminded him that love could exist in many forms, not just romantic, but in the deep bonds of friendship and community. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. And within himself, he found a profound sense of self-respect that no one could take away. He was no longer the man weighed down by others' expectations or diminished by their criticisms. He was whole, content, and filled with a quiet confidence that radiated from within. His journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. The future was his to shape, and he intended to fill it with the joy, peace, and love he had always deserved. He also discovered the profound joy of helping others, a joy that felt like sunlight breaking through a stormy sky. It started with small gestures, lending an ear to someone overwhelmed by doubt, offering a kind word to a struggling friend, or sharing a piece of wisdom with someone younger who seemed lost. But as time went on, this joy grew into something larger, something life-changing. Sharing his story and the hard-earned lessons life had etched upon his soul became more than an act of kindness. It became a mission that filled his days with meaning and purpose. Each time he spoke to younger generations, he felt an unbreakable connection, as though he was passing on an invisible torch of resilience and hope. His words were not just advice, they were lifelines, truths woven from decades of triumphs and failures, spoken from a heart that understood the depth of pain and the sweetness of overcoming. He found immense fulfillment in becoming a mentor, not just to the young but to anyone seeking clarity in a chaotic world. His guidance was gentle yet powerful, reminding others of the immeasurable value of self-worth, the courage it takes to walk through life's storms, and the undeniable beauty of embracing one's imperfections. In offering this guidance, he found his own spirit renewed, as though each word of encouragement he gave to others echoed back, lifting him further out of the shadows of his past. But his greatest transformation was learning to become his own anchor, his own unwavering source of strength. The more he reflected on his journey, the clearer it became that true happiness was not a gift waiting to be granted by others. It was a treasure waiting to be discovered within. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, he could stand before a mirror without feeling the sting of regret or the weight of past inadequacies. Instead of seeing flaws, he saw resilience. Instead of reliving mistakes, he embraced the lessons they had taught him. His reflection no longer carried the shadows of a man who had been broken. It revealed someone who had weathered life's fiercest storms and emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakably whole. Every scar told a story, every wrinkle a testament to battles fought and won. They were no longer marks of pain but badges of honor, evidence of a life lived fully, with courage and authenticity. Even in solitude, he found a rare and profound peace. The quiet, once a reminder of loneliness and absence, became a sanctuary, a sacred space for reflection, creativity, and gratitude. In the stillness, he rediscovered parts of himself that had long been buried beneath the noise of the world. He came to understand that being alone was not an emptiness to be feared, but a freedom to be celebrated. Solitude was no longer a void. It was a blank canvas on which he could paint the narrative of his life, unbound by the expectations or judgments of others. It was in these quiet moments that he found the courage to dream again, the clarity to forgive himself, and the strength to nurture a deeper gratitude for the simple joys of life: a sunrise, a good book, a quiet walk, or the laughter of a distant child. As the months wove themselves into years, he often looked back on his journey with a heart swelling with pride and gratitude. The pain he had endured, though once unbearable, had been the forge in which his resilience was shaped. It had taught him to value himself, to recognize his worth, and to set boundaries that protected his peace. Most importantly, it had taught him never to settle for less than he deserved, in relationships or in life. He had come to understand that love, real, enduring love, is never about losing yourself to meet someone else's expectations. It is about mutual respect, acceptance, and the kind of partnership that allows both people to grow. He often marveled at the irony of life. The relationship that had once stripped him of his confidence and self-esteem had ultimately led him to rediscover his own strength. The heartbreak that had once seemed insurmountable had become the seed of his transformation. What he once thought was the end of his story had turned out to be the beginning of an entirely new chapter, richer and more fulfilling than he could have ever imagined. It was this beautiful irony that brought a soft, knowing smile to his face each day as he embraced the man he had become. His life became a living testament to the power of self-love and resilience, a beacon of hope for anyone who doubted their ability to rebuild after devastation. His story, once a tale of heartbreak and loss, transformed into a narrative of empowerment and renewal. It reminded him, and everyone who heard it, that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity, to rise above the ashes, and to live with authenticity and pride. As he embraced this new chapter, he began journaling, pouring his thoughts, reflections, and hard-won wisdom onto the pages. Writing became both an act of healing and a way to immortalize the lessons he had learned. Each entry was a love letter to himself and to anyone who might one day stumble upon his words and find solace or strength in them. He wrote of the importance of self-love, the bravery it takes to walk away from toxic relationships, and the quiet, understated beauty of aging with grace and dignity. His journals became his treasure, a collection of truths that reflected the depth of his journey. Over time, his writings caught the attention of a local group that hosted talks and workshops for seniors. They invited him to share his story with others, and though hesitant at first, he eventually agreed. Standing before a room filled with faces lined by time and experience, he spoke from the depths of his soul. He shared his darkest moments, the despair that had once consumed him, and the revelations that had brought him back to life. His words resonated deeply, leaving ripples of hope and inspiration in their wake. Each time he stood before an audience, he felt his purpose deepen. The applause at the end of his talks was not what moved him. It was the quiet gratitude in the eyes of those who approached him afterward, the trembling hands that reached out to thank him, and the heartfelt stories of others who had found courage in his words. In helping others find their strength, he found healing for his own heart. And so, he lived his days with intention, savoring the beauty of each moment and the freedom he had fought so hard to achieve. He walked beneath golden autumn leaves, shared laughter with friends, and relished the quiet satisfaction of knowing that his life, though imperfect, was beautifully and unapologetically his. In the end, he learned life's greatest truth: our worth is not something others can grant us. It is something we carry within, waiting patiently to be discovered, cherished, and celebrated. This was his legacy, a life reclaimed, a spirit unburdened, and a heart filled with gratitude and love for the person he had become. His words resonated deeply, weaving through the hearts of those in the audience like a melody they had longed to hear. Many had endured similar struggles, trapped in the suffocating grip of societal expectations or relationships that no longer served their growth. As they listened, some were moved to tears, others sat still, holding on to his every word as if they were lifelines. When the talk concluded, countless people approached him, some with trembling hands and tear-streaked faces, expressing heartfelt gratitude for his honesty and courage. For the first time in years, he felt his story carried a purpose beyond his own healing. It became a bridge of connection, a beacon of hope for those searching for their own way forward. His life began to blossom into a harmonious balance of giving back and savoring the present. Each morning, he walked to the community center, where he volunteered to offer guidance and companionship to those who felt forgotten by the world. Whether through a kind word, a shared memory, or simply the act of being present, he found immense fulfillment in showing others that they mattered. His afternoons were reserved for his passions, those quiet pursuits that filled his soul with peace. He immersed himself in painting, allowing the colors on his canvas to reflect the depth of his emotions. Long walks through the park became his meditative ritual, where the rustle of leaves and the songs of birds reminded him of life's beauty. Evenings, however, were his sanctuary. He cherished the quiet moments of reflection, sipping tea as he looked back on his journey with gratitude for the strength that had brought him to this place of serenity. The relationships he nurtured in this new chapter of life were unlike any he had known before. They were built not on obligation or appearances, but on genuine connection. These bonds were steeped in mutual respect, shared vulnerabilities, and an unspoken understanding of life's unpredictable tides. There was no need for masks, no compulsion to impress or strive for validation. For the first time, he felt the relief of being truly seen and accepted for who he was. These connections weren't grand or dramatic. They were steady, grounding, and profoundly fulfilling. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. One afternoon, while visiting a local art exhibit, he struck up a conversation with a woman who was examining a painting with the same quiet intensity he often felt while creating his own work. Their conversation began with art but soon meandered into stories of resilience, rediscovery, and the joys of finding oneself later in life. She, too, had endured heartbreak and emerged stronger, and together, they found a connection rooted in authenticity. Unlike his past relationships, their bond held no grandiose expectations, no attempts to complete or fix one another. Instead, it was a partnership of equals, a quiet and steadfast companionship that added richness to their days without diminishing their individuality. Over time, he realized that love, when freed from the weight of expectations, could be gentle, liberating, and profoundly beautiful. It was not about clinging to youth or striving to meet society's ideals. It was about truly seeing one another, the flaws, the wrinkles, the stories etched into their beings, and embracing them all. Their love became a shared space of warmth and understanding, where laughter was abundant and silence was comfortable. As he continued to grow older, he embraced each phase of his journey with an open heart. The lines on his face and the silver in his hair became symbols of the life he had lived and the wisdom he had gained. Aging was no longer something to be feared or mourned. It was a gift, a chance to deepen his understanding of himself, his relationships, and the world. Each moment felt precious, not because it was fleeting, but because he now had the clarity to savor it fully. He discovered joy in the simplest things. The warmth of the sun on his skin felt like a blessing. The laughter of a child in the park reminded him of the boundless wonder of life. The scent of rain on the earth filled him with a quiet sense of renewal. These small moments, which he had once overlooked in his pursuit of approval, now held a richness that nourished his soul. They became treasures he carried with him, reminders of the beauty that surrounded him every day. In the end, his life became a profound testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It was a story that showed how even in the face of pain, rejection, and despair, one could rise, heal, and find a purpose greater than the suffering endured. His journey reminded others, and himself, that it is never too late to reclaim your worth, to rewrite your narrative, and to live a life rooted in courage, authenticity, and love. His days were not merely a reflection of survival, but a celebration of the transformation that had allowed him to thrive. And in this way, his life left a legacy, not just of lessons learned but of hope shared, a reminder that the human spirit, when nurtured, could illuminate even the darkest paths. What about this story resonated with you the most? Was it the quiet strength of choosing self-respect, the realization that love begins with self-love, or the power of walking away from what no longer serves you? Comment below and share one lesson you've learned from this video that you'll apply to your life moving forward. Let's create a space where we can all grow and inspire each other with our insights and experiences. And if you found this video meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating stories that touch hearts and minds. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Glowing Star.